Bible Worm, reading the Bible with Bible Worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
And I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week, we read Luke chapter 2, verses 21 through 38. The baby Jesus has been born just a week prior, and our reading today is scaffolded by the Jewish rituals that surround his birth. We wonder about the role of ritual in our own lives, and about the very different ways that Simeon and Anna, two individuals who seem very close to God indeed, navigate the passing days of their lives, one in constant ritual devotion, and one out in the world awaiting the divine pull toward the temple. And as readers in a world where Jews and Christians are sometimes defined in opposition to each other, it seemed important to take in the centrality of Jewish practice in Luke's rendition of things. The infighting later is real, but for now, this child is called both a revelation to the Gentiles and a glory for the people Israel. Thanks for being with us. Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Hey, Amy, I am pretty good. How are you?
I am pretty good. And also, I got my first pair of progressive glasses yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
And I have not fallen down any stairs or done anything like that. But since I've been sitting at my desk like more than once now, it's like, it really looks like my desk just moved. Like,
yeah.
It's a little something special.
Yeah, welcome to the downhill, as they say.
So if I like scream suddenly,
yeah,
didn't I scream once because there was a bug? Maybe
you did. Yeah, there was a whole thing about no, we didn't edit it out.
We didn't.
There was a cockroach
Sorry,
under a glass. Yeah,
there was a cockroach under. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I shifted to progressive lenses about a year ago, maybe, and I like it. It's good once you get used to it, but it takes a little. There's a little bit of like world shifting.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a curve. They told me. Obviously they told me there would be, and they said the doctor said don't get them until you really need them, because otherwise you'll be like, this is annoying. I don't want them. Yeah. But once you get to the point where you really can't see anymore, you're like, well, I guess we're going to deal with this because this is what's happening. It
is where we go. I discovered this weekend my daughter made some earrings with they're like little plastic bead earrings. And she was like, I'm going to give these to Mom. And I was like, why don't you give them to me? And she's like, well, because you don't have your ears pierced. And I was like, oh, yes, I do. And so, I don't know I didn't know if I did or not. Like, I had my ears pierced in college for probably
at some point you
4
had
or
them
5
pierced.
years. Yeah. So
did you have both ears pierced in college?
Well, I had my left ear pierced twice. And for a little while, I had my right ear pierced once. But it was only for like, my right ear was only for like maybe 6 months or a year or something. And so it grew back. But I discovered this weekend that I still have my ears pierced and that I can wear earrings. And so I was wearing hoopy plastic bead earrings for a while, and it was amazing.
She could make you a pair of earrings and you could wear them both in one ear.
Yeah.
That's cool.
What you would do. So now I'm like, you know what? I could, like, my midlife crisis could be, I'm going to start wearing earrings again.
Yes. Little beady ones.
Good
idea.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. We're in the book of Luke.
We are.
We're in chapter 2.
That's true.
And we're in this glorious part of the narrative lectionary where we pretty much just pick up where we left off every time.
Yeah, it's true.
So I don't know that we really need to give a lot of orientation, but is there anything? So our reading today starts in verse 21, chapter 2, verse 21, goes through verse 38. Is there anything that you want to put in our readers' minds before we start reading?
Yeah, the last time you and I were together, in live action as we are now. It was before Christmas, and so Jesus had not yet been born.
Yes.
We played our special episode this past week, and so if our dedicated listeners have listened to that episode, then you are all caught up. If not, Jesus was born. Ta-da! Since the last time we talked. And
yeah, that's important. That's
that
important.
is important. Like, it's pretty crucial to the gospel that Jesus is born. Because he's a main character in the rest of it.
Okay, so it is about a week later, and I am reading from the NRSV, and I'm picking up in verse 21. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child, and he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. When the time came for their purification according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male shall be designated as holy to the Lord. And they offered a sacrifice according to what is stated in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Bobby, can you just remember when you had a baby that was 8 days old?
I can. Yeah.
I mean, first, it's just so, I mean, my life is so different than the lives of families in ancient Israel in all the ways. But I'm trying to sort of picture where the family is in different parts of this story. Right. So they are in Bethlehem. They had to go on this long journey while Mary was so pregnant. They give birth. Well, Mary gives birth. It's really a one-person situation. Mary gives birth to this baby in a manger. Do we imagine that they would still be in Bethlehem on the 8th day?
Amy, that's a good question. And I was thinking about this, and the text doesn't really tell us, but they're in Bethlehem, which is quite a ways from Nazareth, probably a couple days journey, and trying to make that journey with a newborn. I mean, Mary made it when she was pregnant, like very pregnant. So maybe, but I cannot imagine that they got back on the road and went home. And the circumcision, which takes place on the 8th day, could have been done. It's not a temple ritual, so it could have been done wherever they were. Right. But then they're going to come back for the purification, as we'll talk about. And so instead of going like forth and back.
Yeah.
Did you remember our John Hayes, our professor of blessed memory? If you ever said back and forth, he would say, it doesn't make any sense to go back and forth. You have to go forth and back. So whenever I'm tempted to say back and forth, I say forth and back.
You say forth and back and think of John.
And then people think I'm weird.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anywho, I don't think they went forth and back. I think they probably stayed in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
That's not narrated for us.
No, I mean, I think logically that must be. I mean, I can't imagine they would have made that trip right after Mary gave birth. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking of like their vulnerability during that time. Yeah. Like now they've given birth to a baby. And I mean, I just remember that time as like my body hurt and was kind of a mess and needed care and recuperation. And you have this tiny, very vulnerable creature. Yeah. And like, how are they even providing food for themselves? Like, how do they have a comfortable place to be? They were in a manger for the birth. Right. It just makes me, I don't know. I feel like it's an important corrective for me in reading any of these stories about what it was like to travel during this time and what it was like to be part of a community during this time, and how I hope and imagine that in some way the local community must have cared for them. I don't know. I'm filling in that detail, but what else? I mean, what else? How else would it have gone?
That's really important, Amy. And I had not really thought all the way through that, but you're exactly right. You know, Joseph's from the town of Bethlehem, like that's his ancestral town. We don't know how many generations removed he is, but it's not like they had grandma and grandpa there waiting to take them in when they traveled. And so you're exactly right. Like there was no room for them. They ended up in the manger, and it must be that people cared for them. But I love thinking about that vulnerability of that moment, because it's easy to think about them like they had the baby, you know, they went home and watch
Right. I mean, you
Netflix.
hear stories of people who like wind up giving birth to a baby on the side of a road, whatever.
Right.
They didn't get to the hospital, but they don't then spend the next 8 days laying on the side of the road with their baby.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, in this temple ritual, which we'll talk about, is like 40 days or something like that. And so maybe they've been like 6 weeks in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Before they actually go back to Nazareth. And so the community has had to step up for them in some way. And yeah, I mean, Jesus is born in a very vulnerable situation.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Bobby, what do we need to say? What do we need to say about circumcision? I mean, this is a ritual that goes back all the way to Abraham.
Yeah.
But it seems it seems very important to the author of Luke that that this is told. Surely he doesn't tell everything that happened during that time, but this is of critical importance.
It is really, the way you said that it is really interesting what Luke chooses to tell us, because we get this little vignette that we're reading today, and then we get Jesus in the temple at the age of 12, which we'll read next week. And that's all we know about Jesus's young life, according to Luke. And so the fact that Luke does pause to tell us this detail seems like it really matters to him, for sure. You know, that circumcision text is given to us in Genesis 17, and it's from the very beginning. Like, God has encountered Abraham in Genesis 12 and given Abraham the blessing, "In you all the nations will be blessed." And then here's the sign of the covenant, and this will pass all the generations. And so I think there's a couple things to say there. One is just Mary and Joseph were good observant Jews, and Jesus was raised as a good observant Jew, and he is enfolded into the Abrahamic covenant in the way that Jewish people were. And so there is not a sharp break that is happening here, as Jesus is sometimes read as like having sort of come crashing in from the outside and upended everything. But that's not the way this is told. Luke is very careful about saying Jesus is doing all the things that you do. Jesus is in some way a, divine being. Luke is not very precise about what he means by that, but he is born by the power of the Holy Spirit to a virgin. And yet he still needs to be marked in the way that humans are marked. And so for me, this says a little bit something important about Jesus's humanness and his participation in the covenant, just like everyone else. And, the pain that is endured by someone undergoing circumcision is experienced by Jesus. I mean, Luke's not talking to us about that, but like, this is a very human, covenant-centered moment for Jesus.
Yeah.
What does that look like from your perspective?
I think what was most striking to me is really sort of where you started, is just that this section of text really, I feel like, goes out of its ways to ground Jesus's story in Jewish tradition and Jewish law. And I wondered, I'll ask you this question first, because I'm not quite sure of what my answer to the question is, but does it, in a world now, today, where Jews and Christians are sometimes defined in opposition to each other, I mean, we know this is part of the story. It's not like you and I are surprised to learn that Jesus was Jewish, but to have this element of it so sort of forefronted, how do you hold this alongside the ways that our communities sometimes hold themselves in opposition to each other now?
I mean, the way that I tend to think about it is, I remember being surprised at some point, probably in seminary, when it was pointed out to me that Jesus was Jewish. And so it's kind of weird how you can grow up around this story and still not quite process it in that way. And we often talk about, like you convert from Judaism to Christianity. And here you have a Jesus who is just Jewish.
And also Jesus.
Yeah. And there's no conflict there.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have imported over the centuries a conflict that is not necessary, or at least it's not ingrained in the New Testament story itself. I mean, one of the things that Luke really cares about is that Jesus is continuous with the story of Judaism. He is coming out of that long Abrahamic covenant and all of that story. He is not doing something different than that. And also that Jesus is the turning point. Like Judaism has always been, since Abraham, pointed outward toward the nations, right? I will bless you so that in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Luke sees that moment as this moment when Jesus is born. Here we have an opening out to the nations. And so it's a continuous story at which Jesus is a pivot point. And so I think Christians often lose track of that, like the continuous story part, and we just see the pivot point.
Yeah.
How does it read from your perspective when I say, yes, we're all part of the same thing, but then there's a pivot, which you would not, I assume, recognize as like the legit. I don't know if I was going to say a legitimate pivot. I don't know. You might allow that, but not as the legitimate pivot. And so I'm curious, like, is it helpful? Like, I think it is very helpful for Christians to remember that Jesus is a Jewish story before it is anything else. And I'm curious what that looks like from your side.
Well, first I have to say I'm so sort of, I guess, relieved to hear that you also were like, you know, a grown human being, a grown Christian man before you realized that Jesus was Jewish. Because I remember studying abroad in college and seeing, maybe in Prague or something, statue that was, you know, Jesus on the cross, and it had Hebrew letters above him. And I took a picture of it because I was like, what is happening?
Right.
What does Hebrew have to do with Jesus? And it's crazy the way that part of the story gets sort of lost in there.
Yeah. I was never taught that Jesus wasn't Jewish, which I think maybe some Christians are. But
interesting.
I was not taught that he was. Like, it was maybe it was just sort of assumed.
I didn't think of a relationship between Judaism and Christianity. They were just two different religions.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think about it that much, you know, at that point in my life.
Is it helpful to you to think of them as sort of, to know that Christians think of them, or at least we should, as continuous traditions? Or is that different? Is it differently unhelpful?
You know, I feel like gosh, that's a good question. There are ways in which it can be helpful. I don't know if it plays out in a way that is helpful, in part because just the way that that history unfolded, Christianity came to be such a more dominant religious force in the world. I'm reading a book right now called, I've probably mentioned it before, Judaism is About Love, by a rabbi named Shai Held. And one of his main points is that there are many critical elements to the Jewish religion that Christianity really raised up in such a profound way. And then they sort of let go of other elements. Like, we're not really interested in that part of Judaism, but we are interested in that part of Judaism. And that they came to be so closely associated with Christianity that Jews sort of backed away from them, because you start to feel like sociologically we have to differentiate ourselves.
Yeah.
And so he's really discouraged. You know, he was like, no, people. That's not how this is supposed to work.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think I just think it's really interesting over the course of this story to see the ways in which differentiation is happening.
Yeah.
I think differentiation within a people, like within the Jewish people, can be particularly painful. And, you know, the same way that Republicans and Democrats within the United States will claw each other's eyes out because we're all invested in the same thing, or siblings, or, you know, whatever. I think the religious aspect of it is really cool and interesting, and the sociological aspect of it is complicated.
Reading with you has been really helpful to me because, you know, I've always just been like, of course, these are continuous traditions. And you have a little bit been like, wait, hang on a second. Like, you know, like you're yes, but you're doing kind of something different over there, Williamson. And, you know, I have started teaching a course on Islam, and the sort of the way that you would think about Christianity as an extension of Judaism, I imagine is sort of similar to the way a Christian would think of Islam as an extension of Christianity. So Muslims will say that, you know, we're all the same, right? Like, we understand what Jesus was really about, and it's close to what you thought it was about, but it's this sort of this.
Right, and then we have this other thing to add in that clarifies everything in a slightly different way than you've understood it.
And then Christians are like, wait a second, like that, you know, that is a different religion. And I'm like, that's what that feels like maybe
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be you.
Yeah, I
talking
think
to
that's
me.
an apt comparison.
Yeah.
I think that's helpful.
Amy, the circumcision, like, my son, they took him away while we were still in the hospital and like circumcised him someplace else and brought him back when he wasn't sad anymore.
Mm.
And so for me, my experience of him is just like circumcision is a thing that he bears on his body, but it's not an actual experience that I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But I also experienced the circumcision of your son
Mm-hmm.
in a very different public way.
Yeah, in
and
my
it
living
changed
room.
in your living room where I almost passed out.
Yeah, me too.
And so like that really very much changed my sense of circumcision, not just as like a mark on your body, but as like a serious experience of like transition in life or something.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that? I don't know if that's something you want to talk about.
I'm glad you bring that up. And I think in some ways it really does sort of raise the question of like, what are the things that we just don't want to see happen? And, but we still want to happen in some way. Gosh, it is just a crazy thing to be a mother at your son's bris is what we call it, which is just, it's just another way of saying brit, which means covenant.
Right.
This is the mark of the covenant. And what I recall is that, they did it. It's pretty quick. There's not actually that much crying. Like it's not dramatic overly much.
Oh, that's funny because that's not at all the way I remember that.
Okay, maybe I've blocked out some of it. I don't know. What I remember is that as soon as they finished, I just like took him in the other room and I didn't want to socialize with anyone and I didn't want to like, I just was like, give me back my baby.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to any of you about this. And I made my husband change his diapers for a few days because I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a hard thing.
I might have missed some of the actual ceremony because I was sitting in a chair next to the wall with my head between my knees, so I wouldn't pass out. It was that's funny that experience might have been more traumatic for me than it was for you.
I mean, I think I only came in. I only came in for a short time, and I didn't really talk to people who were there. And then I took, it was hard.
Yeah.
We did not, however, do a purification at the temple.
No.
What are they talking about?
I'm not 100% sure. The text is interesting because it talks about the time for their ritual cleansing. And, the only place I can really get to, although I think it's a reasonable place to get to, is Leviticus 12 talks about the mother being impure for 7 days plus 33 days. Mm-hmm. And then going to the temple for her ritual cleansing to be sort of restored to ritual purity. And so there's a 40 days. And I don't know why. I mean, the Greek manuscript has their ritual cleansing, but some have edited the there to her. Mm. And so maybe even ancient scribes were struggling with exactly what this means. Mm-hmm. Are you relating this to Leviticus 12?
Yeah, I don't know how else to read it, that there was some kind of ritual that happened 40 days after the birth of a male child. And there was a longer period of time after the birth of a female child. Yeah. Which I actually have heard anthropologically described as maybe a good thing. Like during that time, you're not overwhelmed with things you're supposed to be doing. Like it's kind of a time where you are a little bit outside of society. Like you are just healing and being with this newborn, and you don't need to be integrated into society. Thank you very much.
I like that. It's like ritual family leave, first century family leave.
Yeah. This is like the ritual family leave. Like no one expects you to be out in the world.
The sacrifice that's mentioned here is a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons.
Indeed.
It's interesting to me because in that Leviticus 12 text, the sacrifice is meant to be a sheep and either a turtle dove or a pigeon. And then it says, but if you can't afford a sheep, you can bring 2 birds. Mm. And so the fact that Mary and Joseph bring 2 birds for this ritual purification can be read, and I think maybe should be read, as marking them as too poor to afford a sheep.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I don't quite know what to do with that other than, just to say Jesus is he's from Galilee, he's from the agrarian section, he's ancient flyover country, as I like to call it. and his parents can't afford a sheep for the
Yeah.
ritual. And so
Yeah.
he's coming from the sort of lower, I mean, I don't know how poor they are, but they are on the poor end of the spectrum.
Yes, they're on the poor end of the spectrum. I think that's really important. The tradition makes space for people who are on the poor end of the spectrum, and they have met their religious obligation fully in the way that they can. And there's no,
Mhm.
no problem with it. But I shouldn't say but, like religiously, they have fully met their obligation. And socially, these people are not well off.
I wonder if Mary felt any pressure about that. Like, you're bringing the Son of God to the temple for the ritual, and you would feel some pressure to make it like super flashy, and like she's just bringing.
That's a really interesting question, Bobby. Like, what is in her head during this time about this baby? The text doesn't give us anything about that.
Yeah, that's true. We also get this bit about the firstborn male being dedicated to the Lord, which we saw earlier in Exodus 13. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's different than this idea of the sacrifice of purification that happens.
Yeah.
This is this sort of overarching teaching that the firstborn of all creatures, and even like the first fruits of your crops, belong to God as a way of expressing gratitude, and also expressing maybe faith that this is not going to be the only thing. Like, you can't say like, okay, I got my thing and now I'm fine, and I'm going to move on or move away from this relationship with God. You have to sort of give the first one back. However, within the text of the Hebrew Bible, we do not sacrifice firstborn children. And so what is given back is a silver, like you sort of have a redemption of the firstborn, pidyon haben. And so that's, I imagine, what they're talking about here. Do you have any connection in your mind to the story of Samuel here? Because we just just a little while ago read this poem that reminded us of Hannah, and then she had brought Samuel and sort of given him over to temple service. But that, of course, was when he was a little older. I don't know. Are you even thinking about that or not really?
Amy, when you say it that way, I think yes. Because I think we talked about this Exodus 13 also, and when we talked about Hannah's story in 1 Samuel.
Yeah.
And then we talked about Hannah last week. But that's as far as I can get. Like, I can't press it the next step about, so what then?
Yeah.
The one thing, the thought that's kind of clicking around in my head is that Hannah has to give her son back to God.
Yes.
And that means taking him to the shrine.
Yeah.
Mary also is giving her son back to God, but in this other way.
In a different way. Yeah.
It's not really going to play out until his adulthood.
Yes. No, I was thinking, yes, this miraculous birth, miraculous in different ways, of a child who will be given to the service of God in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, the other thing that happens in this little section, Jesus gets his name, which is the name that was given to him by the angel. So that sort of circumcision and the naming all happen kind of together.
Yes, they happen together.
Which is still the practice, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, you usually do not announce a baby's name before the 8th day. I think because what I've been taught is that so many babies died in the first week.
Hello, fellow Bible worms. My name is Amy Marie Epp. I'm a pastor at Seattle Mennonite Church in Seattle, Washington. I support Bible Worm at the early worm level, $8 a month, and I consider that professional budget dollars very well spent. What I especially love about being a patron at this level is having access to those podcast episodes a week early, since I'm often working that far ahead on sermons or on worship prep. Also, by the way, I love the sticker, which I put on my water bottle immediately. Amy and Bobby's insight and wisdom have become an invaluable resource for me. I look forward every week to hearing them chew through that biblical text together with curiosity and with humor. It feels like I'm a part of the conversation. That's why I wanted to support them in making Bible Worm possible. It still feels like a gift each week to have that Patreon episode land in my inbox. I hope all of you who are listening will also consider becoming patrons. And now, back to this week's episode.
All right, we better move on, Bobby. We've spent a long time talking about 4 verses.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, I'm picking up in verse 25. Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, looking forward to the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit rested on him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. Guided by the Spirit, Simeon came into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him what was customary under the law, Simeon took him in his arms and praised God, saying, Master, now you are dismissing your servant in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel. And the child's father and mother were amazed at what was being said about him. Then Simeon blessed them and said to his mother Mary, This child is destined for the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. I can't help but think, because you mentioned before our teacher, John Hayes of blessed memory, saying you have to go forth and back, that the falling and the rising, I don't know, the order in which that is said, because I always think of things as the rise and the fall.
Oh, yeah.
But this
the
is
fall
the fall
and the rise. Yeah.
Okay, Bobby, back to the beginning here. I have a question for you about a word that is in that first verse, 25. This man Simeon is looking forward to the consolation of Israel. I mean, I think I know basically what is being referred to, but usually I hear it as like the redemption of Israel or something like that. And I wonder what you might say about using the word consolation instead.
Yeah, the CEB that I'm reading actually has the restoration of Israel. But the word there is paraklesis, which I think comfort or consolation is a better way of reading that. The Gospel of John famously refers to the Holy Spirit as the paraclete, which comes from the same word, the comforter. And so I like reading it. I think I want to stick with your translation of the consolation or the comfort. When you say it that way, it takes me back to the second part of Isaiah and that sort of famous, like, comfort my people, that this arrival of the Messiah is in some way not just redemption, which I mean is important, but also there is this sort of like gentleness to it, or this recognition that there has been suffering that now is being tended to. Luke uses the term paraklesis a couple of other times. One is in his version of the Beatitudes, he says, woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. And the other is in a parable. He tells about a poor man named Lazarus who dies and then goes to heaven where he is comforted. And these are the 3 appearances of that word. And so it's interesting, like Luke is using that word about comforting someone who has suffered. And in the other 2 instances, particularly about, like, in contrast to wealth, like you have the one who is comforted is one who has been poor and suffered and now is receiving comfort. How does that read to you?
Bobby, I love all of that. And it's making me want to skip for a minute to the end of the section I just read, and we can go back and do the intermediate part in the middle. But what Simeon says to Mary at the end, the child will be destined for the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed.
Yeah.
And then there's the sword part that we can get to.
Yeah.
Like, consolation is not the word I would use for that.
Yeah.
I mean, let me ask you first, like, how do you understand in particular that middle part, that this child will be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed?
Yeah. I mean, the way that I am reading that is, I mean, Jesus is a controversial figure, and the gospel that he teaches of love and forgiveness is a controversial gospel. And the message of make sure that you tend to the needs of the widow, the orphan, and the stranger before you tend to your sort of leisure needs is a controversial message. And, one of the ways that I read this is about establishment religion, which tends to uphold the sort of comfort of the wealthy.
Yeah.
And Jesus is not about that. And so he's emerging within this tradition that has come to be established in this text as establishment Judaism, but today it's establishment Christianity, and is saying, no, this faith is not about the comfort of the wealthy. It's about the comfort of the ones who suffer. And that creates a lot of problems for people who have benefited under the current sort of establishment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I read it. Like, yeah, it's going to, you just, go into a sanctuary and preach many Christian sanctuaries in the US today anyway, and preach a message of lifting up the poor before you tend to the needs of the wealthy, and you'll get run out on a rail, And so it's still the same idea, I think.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Bobby, because and I know that you know this, but the teachings that you lift up about caring for the poor and about love and forgiveness are largely the teachings of the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
And Jesus is going to hold them up in a way that people can't not deal with them.
Right.
Like you totally could give a sermon in a big fancy church about caring for the poor in a way that didn't make rich people uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like that does some kind of treatment of it that somehow what you're doing is also okay.
Yeah, like the charity version. Yeah.
Yeah, the charity version. Yes. But somehow the way that Jesus is going to lift this up is going to reveal the inner thoughts of many. So like, whereas it used to seem that all these people were united in their beliefs and could sort of agree to, yes, these are the teachings that are in our text, it's going to reveal fault lines, I guess.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel like consolation.
What you're saying is really important all the way around. And, the way that I said that was intentionally gesturing to the Hebrew Bible as a way of saying this text can be read as some Jews are going to come to believe in Jesus and some aren't, and that's the rise and the fall.
Yeah.
But I think that is a poor reading. I think it's about this establishment idea, and that this tradition, both in its Jewish manifestation and in its Christian manifestation, carries within it this idea of the most vulnerable being the most important. And that's gonna cause the problem. It's between establishment and disestablishment, or between wealthy and not wealthy. And you keep coming back to this idea of comfort and discomfort, which I think is right. But in both of those other instances that I was raising where Luke talks about comfort, or Luke has Jesus talk about comfort, it is precisely in context that's differentiating who cares for the poor and who doesn't. And it's contrasting, like the one on the Beatitudes is, woe to you who are rich. You've already received your comfort. That's a discomfort text.
Yeah.
So is the rich man and Lazarus text. Lazarus is being comforted while the rich man is burning in the fires of Hades.
Yeah.
And so every time there's a comfort text in Luke, it has this sort of discomfort edge to it. Not everyone is being comforted. And I think that's being gestured to here.
No, I think that's right. There's a real sort of, I want to say like a truth telling. There's like we're just the people who are comfortable are often the people who have power. And so to make them uncomfortable means things are going to get really messy because the people with power are going to be upset.
I mean, and this is what Mary sang in her song we read a couple of weeks ago in the Magnificat. The poor will be lifted up and the rich will be pulled down. Here we have the rising and falling of many. Like it's the same underlying concept, just expressed in a different way.
Yeah. I love this portrayal of Simeon as having some kind of special connection to God and some sense from what's described here as the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
That he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. It just is such a sort of, I don't know, like magical, I'm sure is the wrong word, but it almost reminds me of the story of John the Baptist in the womb responding to Jesus in the womb. Like there's this, righteous but kind of random man named Simeon who also has a sense of things, like some kind of deep connection, and then this awareness when he encounters the baby and apparently takes it out of his parents' hands. And then we never hear about Simeon again, do we?
No, we don't. This is the only appearance of Simeon. It's funny because Simeon reminds me, this is so less dignified than what you just said, of, in the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they're looking for the Holy Grail and they find it. And there's like one of the original, like medieval knights who has been protecting it, the guardian of the Grail. He's like, I don't know, he's like 1,000 years old or whatever. He's just waiting for somebody to find this Grail so he can die.
Oh,
Simeon reminds me a little bit of that. Like,
you are finally dismissing your servant.
Yeah. It's like, oh, thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. So what the things that he says when he takes the little baby Jesus into his arms, it rings a lot of like Isaiah bells in my head. Is there anything in particular you want to draw out from those? From that,
I would love to hear what you're connecting with Isaiah. Tell me about that.
I mean, I'm thinking about the sections in Isaiah that are not first Isaiah so much, that's, focused on 8th century stuff, but, more like Isaiah 52, I think it is, where, the sense of God in the presence of all peoples.
Yeah.
And this sort of like expansive sense of the people will come to be aware of God, and God will be the protector of all the people, and a light for revelation to the Gentiles. I didn't look up how exactly that's said in Isaiah, but that idea, is that just the light to the nations? Maybe. Yeah. That
verse 32 seems so important to me. It's a light of revelation to the Gentiles and a glory for your people.
Yeah.
So the sense is that your people don't need a revelation because they've already got the Torah. But the Gentiles don't have the Torah, so they need a revelation. And so this Christ child is going to reveal to the Gentiles what the people of Israel have already known from the Torah. Yeah. And so then the Gentiles are going to recognize, like, oh, that's what you guys have been up to this whole time. And it's going to be to their glory and to God's glory. I think that's a really lovely image. I
think that's lovely too. And it's I don't know why my mind is like hooked on this week, but that this is not a bad thing for Israel. Like, this is good. No. Like, the people will have the revelation, all the people, the Gentiles, and it will be a glory for the people Israel. Like, this is good. It's good all around.
Good all around, unless you are like an establishment person, in which case, like,
then
maybe,
it's a problem.
Maybe less good. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's not the line it's drawing.
I really love Simeon because he just seems like a guy. Like, he's not a religious functionary. He's not a prophet. He's just a guy.
Yeah.
He seems to live maybe in Jerusalem, but just like the Holy Spirit is with him. And so he's had this, like, it seems like for a long time. I mean, this is the way I read it anyway. What Simeon says to God is like, you told me some time ago that I would get to see this, and now I've seen it. And so now I can die happy. And so you get this sense, at least I do, of Simeon has like been going back and forth to work for, 30 years and walking by the temple, and then suddenly today is the day, and the Holy Spirit moves him toward the temple, and he encounters the family. And so there's this sense of a long period of waiting for him, I think. Yeah. Sort of mundane waiting, like not anything particularly special. Yes. And then here it is all of a sudden.
I love that. I love both the sense of like just connection to the divine flow through the world that entails, like an awareness of where you're being drawn at different times. But also, as you said, this sort of mundane waiting, it's he lived his life while waiting for this thing. And then one day it was the day. Like, he didn't sit at the steps of the temple for 30 years waiting.
Right.
It's a lot more what life looks like for most of us.
Yeah, that's agreed. Yeah.
I feel like we should move on soon, but I also feel like I would be a little remiss if I didn't point out this last thing that Simeon says after his words about the destiny of this child,
Yeah.
which feel a little bit like, oh, P.S. a sword will pierce your own soul. Okay, thanks, bye. Sorry about that. Sorry about your soul, Mary. And that still the text doesn't tell us anything about. I guess it tells us in the verse before the child's father and mother were amazed at what was being said about him, but we get so little of their experience here. I guess I want to ask you how you think Mary, what Mary did with that, but the text doesn't tell us. So,
we've seen all these other places up and before now where Mary, held these things and pondered them in her heart.
She pondered them. That's what she did. She pondered it.
We don't get that here. So maybe she's trying to forget this thing happened. I don't really know. It's a very sweet, it's not exactly sweet, but it's a pretty sweet story right up until this moment. And then all of a sudden there's this kind of dark cloud that sort of appears on the horizon. Yeah. And I think in one sense, it's just good foreshadowing from the author of Luke to say like this story, it's a beautiful story, but it's a hard one, y'all.
Yeah.
I don't know if I were Mary and Joseph, like the other day I was out on the porch with my kids and somebody stopped by who was selling some kind of like detergent. And this was somebody who had been homeless and he was like trying to make a living for himself. He was super nice and like we joked around and stuff, but there was always this sense of it, like I was on alert because I'm like, I don't know this person. Yeah. My kids are right here. Like, so I'm trying to like be welcoming and hospitable and also protective.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if they felt a little bit that way of like trying to receive this blessing from this person that they do not know.
Yes.
And then that like, oh, by the way, sword's going to pierce your soul.
Yeah.
I don't know. That would.
Yeah. I think I'd be like, okay, give me back my baby now.
Yeah. Time to go inside. Yeah.
Yeah. Holding all of that together with the idea of the consolation of Israel is they are Israel.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Shall we finish it up? You ready to move on?
Yes, let's do.
Okay. I'm picking up at verse 36. There was also a prophet, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was of a great age, having lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, then as a widow to the age of 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped there with fasting and prayer night and day. At that moment she came and began to praise God and to speak about the child to all who were looking for the redemption of Jerusalem. So she was only married for 7 years, and then she lived as a widow until she was 84.
Yes.
Why do you think those details are important here? Like, why is Luke telling us that part of her story?
We were talking a little bit about Simeon having been sort of waiting in a mundane waiting.
Yes.
Here we have Anna waiting in a very different way.
Yeah. She's been fasting for like 80 years.
Yeah.
Well, not 80 years.
It's so, yeah. And it's hard to know exactly how old, like she probably would have gotten married when she was quite young, as like we were talking about with Mary, like maybe 12 or 14 or 16 or something like that. And so her husband would have died when she was 20 or 24. And then she's lived 60 years since then. And so I don't know. I don't quite know. Like she sort of lived a life. And then there's like this long wait in which she lives kind of a different life. And as a prophet, I don't know. I don't quite know how to put all that together for myself in terms of the details about her biography.
Yeah.
But it does read differently than if you just said there was an old prophet in the temple.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Okay, I'll just make this note and then we can move on for it. But I think if this is trying to be historically accurate here, it's got to be a little bit of an exaggeration because as far as we know at this time, people didn't sleep at there were not people who did not leave the temple.
Right.
And obviously she's not fasting day and night for 60 years. But whatever, it's a, maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but the idea is that she lived her whole life at the temple in a really sort of stance of supplication, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's sort of like when you say oh, so-and-so is always at the office.
Yeah.
Or so-and-so is always at church. It's they're not always, not literally, but like.
Yeah. It's so funny how once it's scripture, we get so crazy about that. We're like, she always was there. And it's like, well, I mean, come on. Like,
yeah, the evidence is that people didn't actually live in the temple. She was there a lot. She was there. It doesn't ring quite the same. Like, she was there a lot.
I think
often.
What's turning around in my head, Bobby, is, well, first of all, the fact that she's a woman, that we have, again, there are many more women in the beginning of this story than we encounter in a lot of other biblical texts.
Luke very famously tells lots of stories of women, and he often pairs the story of a man with the story of a woman. So we got Zechariah's story, then Elizabeth's story, and here we get Simeon's story, then Anna's story. He's interested in the stories of women in a different way than the other Gospels.
Yeah, and I love that. And the way you just said that actually helped me remember a little snippet of a conversation that I think we had a couple weeks ago about how Mary and Elizabeth both were sort of at the edges of the continuum of the part of a woman's life where she fits into a particular societal role where she is expected to be wife and sexual partner to her husband and bearing children and caring for the home and, whatever the social expectations were that were quite strong at that time. And again, when I pointed out how, Mary and Elizabeth are sort of at the ends of that continuum. And now we have Anna, who is sort of outside of the continuum, and has spent most of her life outside the continuum. And it just makes me think about the ways in which she's kind of outside of society and social norms. And we've talked before about why it's so difficult, why the widow is of such concern in the biblical text is that they're so vulnerable. Yeah. Because the system is just not set up very well for them. So I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about what is the significance of not just a woman who drops off her kids at daycare every day and then comes to the temple and fasts and prays and then go to pick them up and make dinner for her family. This is a different life. And I wonder if it plays into what you were saying earlier about institutions being overturned, and I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but she seems outside the system.
The way you're talking about it sounds a little Virginia Woolfish to me. Like one needs a room of one's own in order to fully thrive or something like that. Outside of the expectations of that society has for women. Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know, but I like that way of thinking about it. Is here is Anna she has lived out her societal expectations, and this is where she has been led. And so it enables a different kind of life in her. Yeah. And she makes the most of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's right.
We know it is noticeable that she is called a prophet. There are other women prophets in the Bible. Yes. We talk about from time to time. Miriam is one, Deborah is one. The one that Anna reminds me of a little bit is Huldah, the prophet in the time of Josiah. You remember this story where they're cleaning up the temple and they find the scroll of Deuteronomy, it seems, and they take it to Huldah. And she's the one who says, oh my goodness, here's this thing, that's going to change everything. I read Anna a little bit that way, as she's in the temple of prophet and here's this baby who's going to change everything. And
I love that connection. I love that, to be able to, this is a person who's in the temple all the time. They see lots of holy stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's something that is really remarkable. I mean, she sees babies brought to the temple all the time. This was the normal practice.
Yeah.
I love that connection.
But she knows, yeah.
Yeah.
Amy, the name Anna in Greek is Hannah.
Yeah.
It's the same name as Hannah, right? That we read a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
I don't know if we make anything of that or not. Do you make anything of that?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I noticed it. And again, it sort of tugs at me in the same way that we noticed it at the beginning. Not the name, but the connections to the story of Samuel and his mother Hannah. And then we weren't quite sure what to do with them. Yeah. Here again, we have, I don't know. I don't know if it was just a popular name or if there's something we want to draw in particular. I mean, Hannah is miraculous birth, the model of prayer, honest with God. She has this prayer experience in the temple that's recounted. I'm trying to think if there's anything in particular we might want to draw. And I can't find just the thing, but it feels like it's sort of it's infused into the story in some way.
I think that I'm with you. It feels important, and I can't name the way it's important, but sometimes just like stirring that up has its own value.
Yeah.
Amy, I'm just noticing this for the first time, and so I don't know. But it says in verse 38, she began to speak about Jesus to everyone who was looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. And there, that word is actually lutrosis, which means redemption or ransoming or releasing. And so so Simeon has been talking about the comforting of Jerusalem.
Yes.
She's talking about the redemption of Jerusalem. I don't know. It's yet another thing that I don't know where to take it, but I just am noticing that.
Oh, I think it's really helpful that the text, these two different, I want to call them seers, although the text doesn't use that language for them, but they see something that other people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
They are drawing on these two different elements of what the world to come looks like, what that moment looks like for Israel. And one of them is comfort and one of them is redemption.
Yeah, and then if you follow that one step further and connect comforting to this sort of economic comforting that I've been trying to draw out, then it's that the redemption of Israel relies on the comforting of those who have suffered or something like that. So the redemption of the community is tied up with the comfort for those who have been on the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably pressing the text maybe one step further than it naturally wanted to go, but it's sort of an interesting.
Yeah. See where it might gesture if we want to look past it a little bit. All right, my friend. So at the end of this reading, what is feeling most pressing to you as a message?
I think the message that I was seeing when we started is still one that I'm seeing now, which is about the long waiting that these two figures do in different ways. So Simeon's waiting I described as sort of mundane waiting, just living his life. He's got this seems to have this promise that things are going to change, but his life just goes on, and he's, going to work and doing all the things, and things haven't changed until they do. And then Anna has a sort of similar experience of this long, presence in the temple, but hers is this sort of set apart kind of waiting that is done in the temple, and it's accompanied by fasting. And she has this sort of some sort of official role, whether it's officially official or just God ordained official, but she is a prophet. And so you've got these two characters who are both sort of living their lives differently, but they're both going through life waiting for a thing that they know is coming, but it has not yet arrived. And then on this day it does. And I think that's just, we talk often here about, we've sort of got these promises from the gospel, these promises from the Torah, that there is this sort of way of life that God has promised that is redemption and comfort. And you wake up every day hoping today's the day. And so far today is mostly not that day. And it's easy to get frustrated about it, Yeah. And here we have this sort of that's the way it is. Simeon waited and Anna waited, and eventually it came. The piece that's new to me today is where we were just sort of landing on this idea of the consolation of Jerusalem and its relationship to the redemption of Jerusalem. And this thought is not yet fully formed in my mind, but I'm intrigued by it. That especially this word consolation and the way that Luke is using it, talking about this sort of Jesus moment and the lifting up and the pulling down, is about the comforting or the consolation of those who have lived on the underside of the oppressive structures that had developed in Judea, the establishment structures at the time. And it's a small step to say yes, and we also have those same establishment structures in our time, and that in some way our redemption is caught up in the comforting of those folks. And that's what the Jesus thing is about. That's what this gospel is about, is the lifting up of those people who have suffered on the underside of the structures that we have created for ourselves. And therein lies the redemption. And that sort of helps me a little bit with that waiting piece at the beginning. It's like, what am I going to do today? Like while I'm waiting. And there's this sort of invitation there about like the comforting, the consolation of those, the lifting up of those who have been suffering on the underside of oppressive structures. Like maybe that's not yet the full arrival of the promised gospel, the promised kingdom, but it's a step on the way. And so maybe this is an invitation that while we wait, we can be a source of consolation and a source of the lifting up and the pulling down, the reorganizing of structures. I think that's what I've got in this text today.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that you were willing to look a little past where the text led you precisely and kind of feel around there and see where it can take us.
What about you, Amy? What are you seeing in this text today?
I think I am feeling really, so that the verse that's right after where we finished just sort of says, when they had finished everything required by the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee. And so I feel sort of struck by the way that Jewish ritual holds the container of this text. And also that the rituals themselves are not like these moments where like the heavens open up and something special happens and whatnot, but they have to be doing them or else none of this would have happened. And so it just has me thinking about the many different ways that the people in my own religious community interact with ritual, and that there are people for whom, I am one of them, I think, for whom the actual ritual, the actual prayer service is really has this incredible potential for encounter with the divine and whatnot. And then there are people who really come towards the end of service to have lunch with everybody. But I guess what I'm feeling at this moment is that all of that is good and real and true and provides this space for these other holy workings to take place. Like whatever it is that leads us into community with each other creates a container for whatever holy thing needs to come through. Yeah, it feels so held by ritual and by their connection to Judaism, which is, again, in the world that we are in today, feels like not a given. So I'm glad to have it drawn out for us by Luke.
I love that, Amy. And, Christian tradition, especially Protestant Christianity, has often been kind of anti-ritual, a little nervous about ritual. And the way you're saying that and the way this text is presenting that are really beautiful, that ritual sort of holds the space in which this life unfolds, and it holds the space in which this story unfolds. And so I like that valuing of the ritual as a way of containing the experience of the divine in some way.
Yeah. So next time, Bobby, we pick up just a couple verses down the line, chapter 2, verse 41, and we're going to read about Jesus's next experience at the temple where he is no longer an infant and can now cause trouble.
Yeah, the tween Jesus getting lost in the temple.
Tweenager Jesus.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I look forward to it. Thanks for this conversation, Bobby. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Amy. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us again next week as we continue on with Luke chapter 2, verses 41 to 52. Until then, keep on digging.